Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another session of Chennai International Center. Somebody was saying that we are having too many of these lectures of late. But one compliment that I got was the quality of each one of these is getting better and better. Thanks to the organizers, thanks to Vanita. So today's topic is a very interesting topic about electronics manufacturing. I'll just do the introduction and then I'll invite Bharat Kumar, who is going to moderate this discussion with two dignitaries here, Mr. Josh Folger and George Paul. These are the two people. I'll give some brief about them. Let me do that introduction about this industry, why we are so excited about it. Electronic manufacturing industry is probably the most dynamic and fastest growing industry globally. Electronics industry is among the top 3 industries that spend the largest amount on R&D globally. The other 2 industries are pharma industry and the auto industry. And a fair bit of R&D spend in these 2 sectors also go to electronics, software, internet, telecom and those areas. So as a result, you will see that the R&D spend in this space, in this sector of electronics, both in software and hardware, is the highest globally. And so there is a direct correlation between R&D spend and innovation and growth. So to be part of this fast growing industry is everyone's dream. Where are we as a country or as a state or even as a city in this context? That's something that the 2 gentlemen will explore today. To discuss this and hopefully present a roadmap for our place in this value chain, we have Josh Folger and George Paul. Every time there is a discussion around manufacturing or exports or growth or future of work, comparisons with other nations always come. It's quite inevitable. China, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, US are all leaders in electronics manufacturing. We are not there, not even there in the long list. If you look at emerging economies, both in electronics and other sectors, a number of countries seem to have a strategic claim or advantage. And here again, the comparison is usually to a state in India. They say Vietnam, which is not even the size of Karnataka, produces and exports more electronics. Certainly more than Karnataka, but maybe even India. Likewise, Bangladesh, which is less than the size of Tamil Nadu, exports more textiles and apparels than Tamil Nadu and maybe a nation, and so on. So the comparison is with the state and emerging nations. So this begs the question, should each of the states take up the challenge and specialize in one area and dominate it? With appropriate state policies and attractive investment ideas, can this be done? Do the states have enough autonomy and muscle power to chart their own strategy? And then at the next level, at the city level, McKinsey Global Institute has been looking at major cities in the world from an economic development perspective, which includes ranking them in terms of GDP and GDP growth. They project that New York will continue to be the largest city contributor to global GDP. That's the number 1 city. In 2011, continues to be the number 1 city. And by 2025, it's expected that it will continue to be the number 1 contributor. But in the top 10, there are a number of electronic manufacturing cities too. Notable ones are Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, and 3 other top 10 cities which will record the highest growth in the next 5 years: Chengdu, Nanjing, and Guangzhou. Very, very familiar names for many of us here. Could Sri Perumbudur and Sri City be the model cities or clusters that can put us in the global manufacturing map? Not necessarily in the top 10, but at least in the manufacturing map. So Folger and Paul will enlighten us this evening on this very aspiration. Josh is the face of Foxconn in India. He's the country head and CEO. After his education here in Tamil Nadu, in Coimbatore, and higher studies in Dallas, in Arlington, Texas, Josh has spent all his time in electronic manufacturing. Spent time in China, in Vietnam, in US, in India, all over. So he's probably the best person that we have in this state to talk about electronic manufacturing. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, he's also in the board of American International School here in Chennai. So those of you who want access to that school, please contact him. So a whole group of people from the school here, I think. George Paul is the president of MATE, Manufacturing Association of Information Technology, and brings 30 years of industry experience in IT hardware products, electronic subsystems, mechatronics, avionics, mechanical engineering, aerospace, and IT services. And as part of the industry, he was actively involved with MATE and other industry bodies towards fostering R&D and manufacturing in India. He is from the HCL group of companies. Like many other MATE past presidents, I think it's a prerequisite if you want to become a MATE president that you would have had to work in HCL.
Or be a supplier to them.
Or be a supplier to them. Welcome, George. So with that introduction, let me invite Bharat to take over the proceedings. Welcome once again. I request you to come and occupy the chair here, please. Thank you.
Good evening, all of you. Thank you, Lakshmi, for a wonderful introduction. So, one way we thought we could begin this was actually to look at a lot of positives that have happened in the electronics industry. And when you think about the success of the electronic industry, the most visible part that comes to mind is a mobile phone. And Chennai especially has seen the likes of Nokia and now Apple being interested in manufacturing here. And we have Josh here, who's commonly referred to as the billion phone man. So he was just telling me over 13 years he's overseen the manufacture of a billion phones, or 3 to 4 phones, a phone every 3 to 4 seconds. So I just want Josh to give us an idea of what has gone right for the country over the last, maybe 8 to 10 years, where the mobile phone industry has sort of significantly grown. And some figures that I have at hand, but right now we have about 268 units making phones and accessories, and this is the growth over about 5 years when we started off with about less than 10. And right now 95% of phones sold in India are actually made in India. So Josh, your views?
Sure. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ms. Lakshmi, thank you very much. Mr. Gopal, thank you for having us here. Friends, maybe I'll take 5 minutes
Sure,
to go through this a little bit. So I have to say, I have to watch what I say, especially the diction, because my mom is right back there. She's a teacher and head of school. So Andrew, you're not alone here, so she'll be correcting me if I don't say the right things. Anyway, see, I think as Ms. Lakshmi and Bharat said, I think electronics is really one of the largest industries in the world. It's about 2 trillion, and currently one estimate is that it'll go to about 3 trillion by 2030. I think it'll be more, by that time. And in India today, it's about 70 billion today. Many of that, a lot of the value addition is still imported, but the number, overall aggregate number is about 70 billion. But the growth rate has been double digit. I'll say the last 10 years. And the national policy of electronics stated that by 2024 that this should be 400 billion. And so that's a target which is set. Now, some of us in Delhi, we've been kicking around a number for the last, I'll say, about a year or so, that we like $1 trillion electronics economy by 2030. So that's really a milestone. The government of India under MeitY has formulated interestingly enough, it's called the $1 trillion task force. And and I'm going to be lucky enough to be part of that, shaping this in the next 10 years. And so we'll see how that goes. Now, as far as for this audience is concerned, Tamil Nadu, when I spoke in the Tamil Nadu gym, I had set a target for Tamil Nadu by 2030 of about 100 billion. And so I think it's achievable. I think Tamil Nadu's today is probably about 12, 13 billion would be the turnover of electronics here. And so it is reasonably achievable given the 10, 11 year time frame. I think Ms. Lakshmi said it very nicely. I think electronics is now very pervasive. It's disrupting many industries, many use cases around the world. And so I have this framework, and this is sort of what I'm building my mind around. And I think there are a lot of smart guys looking at the enabling software around it. People talk about the cloud, artificial intelligence, billions of IoT devices, connected devices, and the framework of this supporting multiple use cases, ranging from medicine, you name it, right? I am just keen on a hardware slice of that and saying what can be done in India. Starting with servers, the IoT devices, of course we do mobile phones, entertainment devices, you name it, right? So I think electronics industry is I think pretty neat and it's pretty cool because I think I have 5 quick points. Number one, I think it's important, and I'll say 5G is really going to accelerate this. Okay. Second point is it's global. People say that, so in my time in Nokia, I spent about 18 years in Nokia. We transitioned Nokia's supply chain from being sort of a regional setup to being a global supply chain. So the supply chain is global. And so I think it's very, very important. The third thing is it's integrated. So what I mean by integrated is that it has all aspects of design, looking at items like industrial design, software, hardware, the integration of all of those things into usable products is really the key. So it really is brings a lot of things into play. The fourth is it's a very fast clock speed. My friends in the automotive industry talk about 3-year clock speed in the industry, right? Turnover of the products. In our space, it's 3 months or lesser sometimes. Some of the industries have some of the product lines have maybe 12 months, but usually it's 3 months, right? How do you ramp up a product, ramp it down, do the qual and things like that. So it's very, very tough. The fifth and the last point is it is very, I call it intensive. It is intensive of everything, capital intensive, technology intensive, working capital intensive, and of course it's human capital intensive. Now, and I think here's where India's democratic dividends plays into part here, right? And I have to say that this is one industry over the last 15 years, thanks to the advice from my mom, that I have been piloting the employment of women. And so today in our company, before this in Nokia, we had a lot of women. Today in Foxconn, about 85% of our workforce is women. Thank you. We're actually very proud of it, and we're very proud of our ladies. And it's actually 100% on the factory floor. On the factory floor, running the machines, the lines. And so it is possible. We focus on 2 things, and this is what typically this industry has to focus on is really focusing on the technology investments and skilling. And I'll say that why is skilling important? I think when you focus on Saraswati, Lakshmi is jealous and Lakshmi will follow. So we really focus on skilling because we have to be world class. This is a global industry, and especially when you're looking at export proposition, it is very important that all these things are there. So with that, I hand it back to Bharat.
Thanks, Josh. So, George, you come with a complete worldview, being a representative of the entire industry, and mobile phones has had a fantastic growth. But electronics sort of spans an entire range, starting from watches to washing machines. So not all parts of the industry seem to have been so fortunate in the past few years. Any perspective that you can throw on that?
So at the onset, thank you for having me here this evening.
Working?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're.
So yeah, as you mentioned, mobile phones has been a subsector of electronics that has succeeded in our country. But if we were to take the other sectors of the country, other sectors of electronics, which is PCs, datacom, telecom, etc., our story has not been so successful. India has had this aspiration of becoming a major electronic manufacturing hub of the world way back in the late 1998-99, and there was a strategy that we had put out as a nation, which was targeting import substitution. It was more how do you conserve foreign exchange, and that was the strategy that we sort of adopted. Now, during that period, a phenomenon happened, what we call as the WTO agreement, and under the WTO agreement, there is a chapter called as ITA 1. And under chapter ITA 1, India is a signatory which says that all products which come under computing and data communication would be pegged at 0% basic customs duty. So what that essentially did was that India or no country could actually put a basic customs duty to protect the local industry that is over there. And electronics, as Josh shared, is a very integrated industry. It is you have multiple layers, each of which is global. So it's unlike steel or where you can have the whole thing vertically integrated. Here, each segment, whether it is the components, whether it is the design, whether it is the products, each is horizontal, specializing in itself, and each has to be of global scale if you have to be competitive in the world. So in a regime where you say that basic customs duty has to be zero, manufacturing naturally will flow to the geography that offers the lowest cost of manufacturing. And some of you who remember during that period, China delayed signing the WTO agreement by 7 years, and during those 7 years, they built their global manufacturing capacity. They inked it, and the entire electronic manufacturing shifted into China. So when we look at the other sectors which are there in our country, the manufacturing story has not been so successful. The government of India brought in a framework called as the preferential market access, very similar to something what countries like US and UK, etc. have, that government purchases, a preference would be given for a made in USA product or a make in India product. And under that framework, we had all the 5 major PC manufacturing companies come into India and set up their manufacturing plants. But for various reasons, PMA was not so successfully implemented, and these companies lost interest. And literally, we have about 6 million PC manufacturing capacity in the country between Pondicherry, Chennai, and Uttaranchal. And today, that capacity is running at something like 10 to 12% capacity. Because these companies just find it so much more cheaper to bring it in from Malaysia or from China or from Vietnam. So it's been a mixed bag for us. There isn't much that we can do about ITA 1, but the industry has given very strong recommendation to the Ministry of Commerce that do not sign ITA 2, which is an extension of ITA 1 that will include medical electronics, instrumentation, and other products, because we fear that a similar kind of scenario would happen.
Thanks, Roy. So, Josh, you talked about certain targets that we've set for ourselves: 400 billion by 2025 for electronics, and then sub-targets for states. And we've talked about what we could have done better. So now, given that we're here, I just did some back-of-the-envelope calculation, and right now, if we are at 70 of a $2.75 trillion economy, and to go to 400 out of 5 trillion means electronics should contribute starting from 2.5 right now percent of total manufacturing of the GDP, to nearly 8%. So what do you think, and I'll come one after the other, what do you think that we need to do the government and the industry, of course the government has a role, but it can't do everything. What does the industry need to do? Or, somebody told me it's very simplistic. There was demand for mobile phones and that's why it took off. So obviously it's not as simplistic as that. So your views, please.
Sure. So I think, this is, as George said, and I mentioned before, this is a capital intensive space and it is global, right? So you need to have a long roadmap. And so we have had a running start, the last 5 years. Yes, mobile phone is a big category, and I think I'll consider it as a good running start to start to build an ecosystem, right? But I think we need to set a 10-year roadmap. I think the NPE charters a course for 2024, but I think what we really need is a course for 2030, right? And so in my mind, I think India should be a 10 trillion economy by 2030, and we do $1 trillion in electronics. So that's 10%, is the goal. And then how you do this, I think it's the policy has to be consistent, from the government. I think no ifs and buts. I think George said about ITA too. I think we just need to really look at this. But it's very incredible to see that even a few ecosystems move here, this number can be achieved quite easily. And so you just need to be very, the government has to be very targeted in their approach on what category you want to go. The one size fits all may or may not fit.
For example, the ecosystems.
So I think in ecosystem, you see, mobile phone is a large category. So last year, India made about 300 million phones. Globally, there is, 2 billion phones made, right? So you have a running start. I think if you focus on export of electronics, of mobile phones, and achieve a 40-50% global export proposition, then you're going to achieve some numbers. So you need to look at who are the top players in the world and attract them, right? So that can be, in a way, one approach, where you can, sort of get these numbers. The second is of course the whole backward integration, and I think we will, as discussed, we'll dwell on that a little bit more later. The backward integration brings the true value addition into India. And so when you look at, and these are very capital intensive. So when making a phone is capital intensive to start with, but when you go into the semiconductors is being talked about, but at least personally I'm not too keen on semiconductor fabs. I think that's a long dream. Yes, we should go there. But there are other categories, battery technology is something we can focus on, display technology, the whole electromechanics, mechanics. All these technologies are, I call them horizontal technologies, which can be used for different electronic verticals. And all these things require a very consistent policy on capital investment also by the government. So I think if we do a combination of these two things or a few other things, I think we can achieve this sort of this number, 10%. Why not?
Okay. So you talked about representation that Mate had made to the government. So his point about consistency in policy. Would you like to dwell on what exactly the industry would look at?
Just taking on from where Josh left, there are multiple reasons why India has to build an export-led electronic manufacturing capability within the country. The one good thing that we see in the NPE 2.0 vis-a-vis our earlier strategy is to move from import substitution to an export-led outlook. Import substitution has also got this aspect that it tends to protect inefficiencies within the economy over here, and you can't compete globally. So when you say that I want to be export-led, very clearly you're stating for yourself that, look, I will be the most competitive manufacturing destination in the world. So that's a good shift that we see. Now, it is projected that the domestic consumption of electronics in 2025 is likely to be around $200 billion or so. And if you look at it after oil, this is $200 billion of net negative foreign exchange, because all of it would be imported if India continues to be where it is. And when we look at the value addition possible in electronic manufacturing, even if we take China, which is the most advanced country in the world in terms of electronic manufacturing, their value addition would vary from about 30 to 40, 45%. It's not more than that. So that shows the amount of dependency that is there on other geographies like Japan and Taiwan, which China, imports. So one of the ways India can offset this 200 billion of foreign exchange negative that we would be by 2025 is to build a export-led electronic manufacturing, and we build for the world out of here. So if we play our cards right, we build that capacity, what we are saying, of 400 billion to be produced in India, out of which 200 may be domestic and 200 exported, then as a nation we would be net foreign exchange positive. So that's another imperative why we have to build an export-led manufacturing ecosystem. And these are some of the points that have been put across to the government. They are also well aware of this. The reality or the fact that we all have to keep in mind is we talk of free market economy, but today it is truly not free market where you got a playing field and companies are competing with each other. Today we have economies competing with each other to attract manufacturing to their geographies. So you have these geographies of China and Vietnam and Malaysia offering incentives to the big manufacturing houses, saying that come and set up your manufacturing here. And they do that because at the end of the year they make more money in those countries. So India too has to sort of take that line if we have, and we have to be pragmatic if we want global manufacturing to come in. In fact, in one of my presentations to the government, I put this line that what India truly needs is actually a suit boot ka sarkar. At this point of time, if we have to succeed as an economic powerhouse, there is nothing to be apologetic about making profit as long as you're not profiteering. So that's what we need to do.
Okay. So I wonder how they took it.
Yes, they had a good laugh.
So both of you talked about support from the government to an extent, and my perspective stemmed from the software services industry, because between 1995 and 2015, it was like went from it really zoomed in terms of presence for ourselves, and then foreign exchange earnings that it got for the country. And one of the big things that happened to the software industry, and I don't know whose idea it was, and how come they let it stay for so long, was export incentive, a tax holiday, right? And I think it benefited the industry benefited a lot. Of course, there were other forms of tax, and many of the CXOs in these industries used to tell me that if I have to train my own folks from scratch to where I want them to be, and then lay roads and then water, then it's a form of tax that I have to pay. But so be it. So is a tax holiday, after all, if you recognize this as a sunrise industry right now, even now, and then say it can actually create so many jobs, and we'll come to estimates later. But do you think that's the way to go? Is that what government should be doing?
So one of the, not one, in fact the representation from a number of industry associations to the government has been that, look, it is reality that China and Vietnam are offering incentives to the electronic manufacturing ecosystem to set up manufacturing over there. So India should start doing it. So India about 8 months back had introduced two schemes, one which is called as the MEIS scheme, and second was what is called as the MSIP scheme. The MSIP scheme was a 25% capital subsidy for electronic manufacturing in the country, and the MEIS was a production-led incentive where for every piece of product that you exported, you got X percentage as reimbursement. Now, unfortunately, MEIS has been challenged in the WTO by US, Japan, Australia, and the country is already said that they are going to discontinue that from the end of this year. So, what is the alternative that we can offer as an incentive to industry? Unlike China, we are a democratic nation. All steps that we take are there in the public domain. In China, a province can give a concession. Nobody comes to know about it. They can give it indirectly. They give subsidies. There are various ways in which they attract and retain manufacturing in those areas. So one of the ways is a corporate tax holiday. You say, just like we did for the software industry, the ask of the hardware industry is give us a 5-year tax holiday from the year you start making profits. Now, hardware industry typically operates at about 10% margin, 10% profit. If you say that you give a 35% benefit, so you're saying that it's about 3% net benefit that comes into the industry, 3 or maybe 2.5. Today, the finance minister has announced something called as reimbursement of direct taxes, about 1.25%.
Yes.
That is essentially from the principle that you do not export embedded taxes in an export market. So that 1.25 has been announced today. So these representations have been made in front of the government, and let's see what comes out.
So you talked about both of you actually talked about the success of other countries, Vietnam, China, of course, a well-known example, Philippines. So in your experience across countries, what is it that they've done right and we could still do it if we just take a leaf out of their books?
So I think, in my years building supply chains, I think the first, I started in the US, of course, and then I think I did Brazil and then Mexico. The item which Brazil followed is very similar to what we have followed in our face manufacturing program in our mobile phones. Matter of fact, it was modeled with that in mind. And so what it does is it basically encourages or incentivizes localization or indigenization. And so that was a very successful formula. Of course, in Brazil, sort of, the competitiveness of manufacturing in Brazil kind of got a little out of hand about 10 years ago. And so that became a challenge. I think a scheme like the STPI is definitely, what China has been following for years. Vietnam has been following it for certain industry segments. And I think this is electronics probably, given I call it the democratic wealth, which electronics can bring across all employable segments of people. I think it's well worth to have something like an STPI scheme for this. It's also a productivity measure. So you are in a way incentivized on what you actually make and actually declare as profits, right? So I think it's healthy all around in my mind. And so Vietnam and other countries have been following this, and so I think I would personally favor something in that order. But I have to say that the government is quite keen to hear all these ideas, and because there are enough disabilities in India, which has to be addressed. And one of the studies I reviewed, I'll say about a month ago, they said that Vietnam is about 1.7 times more competitive than India. And given all these sort of incentives and our disabilities, and China is 2x of India. And so it was a professionally done study, and I think we need to take that into cognizance when we make policy decisions and whatnot. And again, going back to my previous point, we just cannot have a one size fits all. I think as one of the beauties of STPI was that it focused on an industry and made it happen, and sort of, so they say rest is history. And I think electronics is one of those opportunities for India to do so.
Okay. So, we've been looking at issues at a 35,000 foot level, but if you have to come down to certain specific parts of the industry, and you spoke pretty passionately in our earlier conversation on certain kinds of electronics, automotive being one of them, IoT another. What do you think are the opportunities? And I mention automotive because of the Chennai ecosystem that seems to have taken to automotive over the past 4 to 5 decades.
So, I think automotive, how many of you are in automotive space here? Suppliers? Okay, not as many as I thought. So, okay, so you won't, I think I can take you on. So, automotive is a beautiful space. I wanted to, when I graduated in the US, I wanted to go work for Ford. I decided against it because I didn't like the Detroit weather. So here I am doing mechanical engineer in electronics.
And you actually love Chennai weather, don't you?
Well, absolutely. It is, yeah, I like the heat now. I like the AC. See, our automotive industry is beautiful because it has multiple supply chains and whatnot, and it's very integrated. But this is going to be disrupted now, and it's not. People are all looking at four-wheelers. It's really going to be two-wheelers, right? And so the electronics content is increasing, but then really the disruption could be in this EV space. If India, anything, what is happening in China is going to happen in India, there'll be a huge disruption in the automotive supply chain in India. So I think most of the companies have an EV policy, so I don't want to talk too much about it. So that's a great space. But the space I'm really excited about is back on this framework of big data, artificial intelligence, and this IoT. The most exciting space is, from a hardware standpoint, is IoTs. I think IoTs, today there are 2 billion mobile phones. Somebody said that 25 billion IoT devices will be, home switches. You look at, the devices, it's not yet so popular in India, but it's getting to be popular in the US and then China, Europe to some extent, is the whole Amazon suite of products, the whole Google suite of products, right? Xiaomi has their own ecosystem of products. So all these companies have their ecosystem of IoT products with home applications, wearable applications. But it's going to go beyond, right? Industrial applications. So this IoT space is a fantastic opportunity. Electronics can be simple, can be very complicated. The mechanics around it can be complicated, can be very simple as well. So it depends on the use case. And so this IoT is this one space we need to really look, the hardware space. Who's going to make these 25 billion devices, right? So I think that's an exciting space, which is going to be a supply chain in itself. There's going to be guys making PCBs, guys putting the PCBs together, assemblies, mechanics, getting a little bit into the electronics of these things. Some of them will have display devices. What are you going to do with the displays? You have a significant portion of the bill of material. So I think depending on, the form factor is going to be very, very diverse in this IoT space, and that's really what's going to make it very exciting, opportunity. But it's global. The key point here is this is going to be a global game, and when you do your business plans, it has to be a global plan, much like what our software industry has done extremely well. That it's software for the world, right? And so it should be electronics, hardware, IoT for the rest of the world.
Any examples of industrial applications from IoT that's sort of emerging in the West now, but we haven't caught on yet?
Industrial applications?
Industrial.
So I'm actually a robotics engineer. We actually had a robotics startup in the early 90s.
Wow.
And so I think it was, I was programming an RF tag, and this is, and an RF tag had information about what this robot had to do. So the pallet comes into the station, the reader read it, and so this is 1993, when I was programming. So that is your industrial application. It can be a very simple induction sensor. It could be a simple photo eye, on off, right? So these industrial applications are just huge, and they really form a bedrock of your industry 4.0. So these IIoT, or industrial IoT devices will feed into supporting your industry 4.0, which is, I think, a massive revolution in itself.
So, George, I just wanted to pick your brains on components manufacturers. We've talked about end products, IoT devices, if you look upon them as products themselves. But component manufacturing, Josh talked about one size cannot fit all. But if you look at products and then at components, is there a difference in the way the government should be approaching these? Any global examples that have worked well?
Yeah, if you permit me, I just want to take on the
Sure.
previous question.
Yeah,
You said, what are some of the things on ground that we need to do? There is this shift that is happening in the electronic manufacturing ecosystem. It is coming from two areas primarily. One is essentially the aspirations of nations to, raise their standard of living, bring in manufacturing into their countries, and also the leadership that we see in the globe of very strong leaders who are actually talking for their country's aspiration, be it our Prime Minister Narendra Modi or be it the US President Donald Trump. What both of them, between lines, are saying that I need the best for my country. Now, there is this huge amount of manufacturing that's happening out of China, and very clearly US has taken a decision at a strategic level that having all of that manufacturing out of China is too risky for China, and hence each of these companies are today de-risking by looking at alternate sites. That is a reality. What we hear in the news and read in the papers, all these large corporations, be it Apple, be it Foxconn, Flextronics, Samsung, all of them, Samsung is not Korean, are looking at alternate sites for manufacturing. If India has to get a pie of this, we lost the last shift in manufacturing where all of it went into Southeast Asia, none of it came to India. We have to move quick. We have issues in India, things like the central government comes up with a strategy, there is a vision for export, but the state government has got its own thoughts. Land acquisition is a problem. Labor. So these kind of issues need to be sorted out, because particularly for a global corporation that is looking for a manufacturing site, he will go where he finds it most comfortable and easy, and he gets the comfort factor. And it's unfortunate to say that today our reputation of standing in the world as a nation that is easy to do business with is not so good, and hence they are a little skeptical as to how much are we willing to go out, how much will we reach out. The silver lining being that, okay, there is this gentleman called Narendra Modi. He is a man on a mission, and he has the ability to make things happen. So that's the one good thing that we have as a country, and we should, so this is what we will have to do on ground. For a country of our size and for the aspiration that we have, it's extremely critical that we have a transshipment hub out of India, both for sea as well as for air. It's not only electronics, all of the manufacturing that we look at it, we have to be connected directly to our supplier countries and to our market countries. Today, if we have to do it, we have to ship it to Hong Kong or ship it to Amsterdam, de-stuff the containers, stuff another container, from there it goes out, the delays, the cost, all of that. So we need to, so these are some of the on-ground things that we as a country need to, get done immediately if we want to attract this shift in global manufacturing. I am a little concerned because I do not see the kind of conversations happening which indicate that India is in the consideration of these global giants to bring manufacturing into the country. We have exceptions, of course, with people like Josh who are championing India, but he is one too rare for for a country of our size that is there. So there is a lot that the government has to do. That is what we would be sharing with the minister on Monday. The sense of urgency, that sense of contentment that Indian bureaucrats have, that we are India and people will come to us. I mean, today the world is different. I mean, China goes and markets. We have to go and market. We should be knocking on the doors of all these corporations, boardrooms of these corporations, saying that, look at India, come to India. I will give you a red carpet. That's what we should be doing today. So I unfortunately don't see that, but let's work with the government towards making that happen.
So it's interesting. What really worked well for you here? All you have to say is like, we'll do this, and 10 others will come, right?
See, I think, of course, it is economics, right? I think the right kind of policy framework does get it started. So economic starts. So in the mobile phones, it was that. Back when I was in Nokia, it was a strategy. It was just a geo risk management strategy by Nokia in all its foresight at the time, saying that, well, we got too many eggs in one basket, so we're going to diversify. So it can be strategy. And, and as George said, I do bring a lot of passion in this. It does help. It does help. And, back when I was in Nokia, I'm going to slide into the supplier question now.
Okay.
With this, because I think, see, the suppliers are even more hesitant. Yes, it's one thing to invite, let's say a Samsung or a Foxconn, but then the suppliers may or may not have the same wherewithal, the geo knowledge, the risk appetite to enter a new country. And so here's where strategy sometimes helps of an OEM, saying that, okay, well, we need to do all of these things here, and I'm going to commit to you being in India, right? But you just need to continuously market that, to our suppliers. And because a supplier is and that's what makes manufacturing job multiplier, anywhere from 5 to 8x is when the suppliers come, right? And so today, for instance, to support our supply chain here, we have about 300 suppliers, all developed over the last, and these are in all categories, right? And they are in, some of them are large, some of them are medium, some of them are SMEs, right? And are we 100% of them? Not really, thankfully. So, but they started off, with us, and then they diversified with the other customers. And so I think this targeted approach of having the right policy framework, which not only enables an OEM to come here, one of the big companies to come here, but also supporting backward integration from a government is important. And I think then economics really takes over.
So where does the government figure here? Because the other question that I had was the contractors to large companies can now come through the automatic route on the FDI front. Is that just too little? Is that where the government plays? What more can it do when you talk about backward integration?
So backward integration, I think the mobile phone face manufacturing program clearly outlines, it was like, for instance, in 2016, the chargers and batteries came out of a zero duty regime into a BCD. And what happened is today, I can say 100% of all the chargers and the batteries are locally made, right? And so that is the policy. So there is an economics there, right? Otherwise you pay, this tax. Now, this is great for the domestic market. And India is a large domestic market, for certain electronic categories. But for certain categories, it is not. So, but to really truly build a component supply chain system, I mean, you're talking, let's say a guy who wants to do a PCB, fab, $300 million, and they talk in meters, right? And it was unique for me because, I cannot talk in meters with this device, right? So it's like, and then you have to enable, and that comes with a global market. So if an OEM is exporting from India, then he's going to put us. Yes, it's very important to work on the tip of the iceberg, but then I think you need to enable the bottom portions of the iceberg also to sort of form and take shape in India.
The bottom part of the iceberg that you talked about the inverted duty structure that has been the bane for some parts of the industry. Would you care to throw some light on it?
Okay, in today's global scenario, actually, you have to be globally the most competitive place to manufacture if you want manufacturing to come to you. Yes, under ITA 1, most of these components are at zero duty. All right. So, but in any case, when you're looking at an export-led strategy, like I said, India has to be most cost effective if we expect the component ecosystem to come into the country. Now, somewhere, maybe due to a lack of understanding, the decision makers sort of took that all of electronics industry is very similar, just like how a product company is. But the dynamics and the play in product, in a product company is very different from that of a component which is there. In product, what you got the basic building blocks of electronics, which is the PCB, the resistors, the capacitors, the semiconductors, and then you have design engineers who put all of this together and makes from those components a mobile phone, a laptop, power electronics, automobile controller, or whatever it is. So the government sort of expected that, okay, we have this phased manufacturing program, we will get the final product in, then we will get the SMT manufacturing in, and then we will have the component coming in. Like I said, China, with all its manufacturing prowess, still does value addition only of 30 to 40%. And why is that so? Because the components come from outside China. Semiconductors come from Taiwan and Korea. Displays come from Korea, right? Much of the component ecosystem, the passive component ecosystem, is owned by American companies or Japanese companies. That is all about material science. It's all about material science and manufacturing processes. So what I expect, or what we expect will happen, is that with the strategy that we are rolling out now, we have these leading brands come into the country, brands like Apple and HP and Lenovo and all of them come into the country. Their manufacturing, today electronic manufacturing, as the term that economists use, is servification of manufacturing. So typically the brands do the design, but the manufacturing is done by companies like Foxconn, etc., which is over there. So they have already come in India, they will expand. And then you have this typical, what they call as the geese effect, because you have the main player coming in, following him, his next tire will come in, and the next tire will come in. But having said that, to bring in the component ecosystem, the government will have to engage with the component industry to understand what are their dynamics and what do they need to come to India. And we offer them a better proposition, and we will have those corporations shift in over here. But very clearly, when they come into India, we have to manufacture out of India for the world, because it's only that global scale which would make sense for any of them. And our hope is that eventually, maybe 3 years, 5 years down the line, we will have component vendors coming into the country. And there is no reason why India parallelly should not work in developing its own component know-how. So for example, today we have integrated circuits which are typically transistors, etc., which are connected by copper wires, right? So you got a board which is a laminate like this, and there are copper wires that go in which connect transistors and circuits. Now these copper wires are getting replaced by optical tubes. So tomorrow these ICs are going to talk to each other using optical signals, which has got multiple benefits in terms of that there is no heating, there are no noise, right? When you make products denser and denser, one of the problems that you face is you have these spikes, and one spike disturbs the functioning of the product. Now this is an area where, for example, there are a couple of labs in India that has developed working technology. Now I would hope and I would like that if industry in India can work with these labs to bring this to production scale, then when the next generation components come out, which is optical PCBs, we then are a world leader, and we have the IPR for that within our country. So we hope that some of these developments that we will see, so we will go from pure manufacturing to something what is commonly referred to as innovation-led manufacturing. And there are multiple areas where there is opportunity knocking at India's doors. We just need to get our act right. This was one area. Second is medical electronics. Third is IoT devices. All of these are areas where India can take a leadership position in design-led manufacturing and product development.
You talked about making in India, but making for the world. But if I looked at the figures, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the export figures, if I just look at it month on month, is being erratic nature of the beast, because I've seen a lot of spikes up and down, and the figures that have just come out in August talked about some 46% increase in exports for electronic goods compared to a year ago, just the months. So I know it's just a small sample and we're not looking at yearly spikes, but is that how you live in this industry? Because after all, the global economy isn't what it used to be. And here we're talking about exports and saying we want to make this for the world.
So while I'm not an expert in that area, my guess is that because the volumes in India are so low, that is why we see these fluctuations. I mean, Josh may be in a better position to answer, but my reading is that this industry, the fluctuations are not so very rapid. I mean, yes, the product life cycles are shrinking, but it is not that month on month, because invariably you have projections for 6 months, and when you go to industrial electronics or you go to things like PC category, you have got projections at least for a year ahead. Mobile phones, yes, models change and quicker. So I think this is more a phenomenon that we have low volumes. If we have one, if Josh decides to ship out 250 million of his phones to US, well, that year India will show a hike.
So it's all in your hands, is what he's saying.
No, I mean, I think it's, at least in our space, we've been building domestic capacity to cater to the domestic market now. So I think the export growth has been muted, to be very honest. When you look at across the spread the last 5 years, it's not as much as it can be, like a country like Vietnam, right? And so, but I think the buildup has been so far domestic capacity buildup, and these things take time. Capital execution in most categories of our manufacturing. Some of them can be quick, 3 months. Some of them, the gestation is about a year and a half. And so if we now decide to do a strategic move to export, then that capital buildup takes time, and hence the 10-year roadmap, and so on and so forth. And but I think it starts with a strategy to say that, okay, well, and then the right incentives say that, okay, we're going to export, and then we start to build that capacity. I think going forward, I think you will see more build-up in their export capacity reflecting in the numbers.
In addition to demand, if you look at exports, what is it that India needs to do? Compliance with certifications, because again, coming from the software industry perspective, 20 years ago we had to say, CMM level, whatever, we're right up there, we won't let you down. So that is the kind of conviction that the industry needed to give. But is it even a requirement for an electronics industry? What is stopping us from making the best of the export opportunity?
I think the electronics industry, as I said, is global, right? And so right here from Chennai, the Nokia factory used to export to 110 countries. And yes, some of them had CE mark and things like that. But I think it's all relatively straightforward because the products are marked global. And so yes, the configurations has to be sort of programmed the right way and so on and so forth, but not necessarily a unique proposition to address.
Okay. So both of you very briefly touched upon labor, the people who make up the industry. So is skilling an issue? Is it specialized, or you can actually train anybody to make sure that they're part of your workforce as long as you have the right attitude? How does it work? Because what does the government need to do in terms of curricula in universities? If you set a target of $1 trillion worth of the industry in 2030, obviously manpower will make some portion of that. What does it mean for you to say, 5 years from now, this is the kind of people that I need?
So I think skilling is very, very, very close to my heart and our company. And we have a dedicated team which really focuses just on skilling. We are investing heavily in that. See, to me, skilling is the job of the companies. People blame the government a lot, for that. Of course, we'll take any help, from the government. So allow me to diverge a little bit on this. So, see, this is $1 trillion will translate to about 20 million jobs, direct jobs, roughly, give or take, right? In India you can make the mistake.
Digest that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, some people say 17, some people say 20. I just took the higher figure, round it off, right? 2 crores sounds even better for this audience, but but 20 million, right? So what are they going to make up of? So yes, there's going to be about 10% of them are engineers and staff. 20% will probably be what we in India call diploma category, right? My favorite category. Guys who really are skilled in maintaining, fixing, building machines, product-specific hardware and things like that that support this. And then rest are the associates who will support and run and actually manufacture all these things. So I think we need to have a very clear segmented skilling strategy across the board. And now I'm only looking at this manufacturing bit, right? But I think the 10% category, the truth is we have them. When you look at the engineering skill, many of the captive centers are already here. And even in the software services space, they have engineering groups which are actually doing design here. Very advanced chip design, product support, and whatnot. So it is there. So I think we just need to do more of that, right? Because I think I think Lakshmi took all the top talent in the IT industry. So we want to take some of them back.
So from L&T to Foxconn, basically, have you been?
So we want mechanical engineers like me, do mechanical engineering, right? And electronics engineers to do chip design, right? And you can take the CS and IT guys. But I mean, of course, you've done great in that space. So I think so that category is important, and I think we have the ingredients to do that. Yes, the colleges have to have the right curriculum to streamline the students and so on and so forth. The diploma category is a phenomenal category because these are the guys who are actually, I mean, our factory is running today, because of them and not because of me, right? These guys are fixing the machines, making sure everything is smooth, trouble-free, 24/7. So these are the boys and girls who are actually making it happen, right? So this category has to be nurtured, supported. The curriculum has to be very up-to-date. Exposure to the latest products which are coming, the latest technology, because technology in our space changes every 3 months. I was looking at the technology roadmap for next year, and it's very interesting, right? We need to do this particle technology, this coating technology. I mean, just incredible stuff happening there. Our guys can grasp it, no problem. I think but you need to address their aspirations, and we have some plans. I don't want to talk about those plans here, but I really feel that the onus is on people like us in the industry to take and support this. The government support's great. We'll take it, but really the onus is on the companies. The associates, so here's where I will diverge a little bit. See, this 20 million is not going to come from Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi, right? So today we, in our factory, employ girls from all the 32 districts. Is it still 32 districts in Tamil Nadu or more? Sorry, didn't want to make it to 34, okay. So all the districts of Tamil Nadu and all the districts of Andhra Pradesh. And so we offer them dorm or hostel accommodation. Some of them actually are engineering college hostels, and we just went out of business. And we're just trying to mimic what China has done in scale, right? A factory footprint will have a dorm also, and this just gives opportunity to all people outside. And when we have these kind of centers, it's very easy for me to build a large training center, right in the campus, to skill, reskill, retrain, train, our associates. It's a big responsibility. It is not in the framework today, unfortunately. This dorm is not in India's framework today. Why not? I mean, you have hostels, right? It's the same thing, and it can be safe. I mean, if you have the right kind of security, the right investments done there. Yes, it is expensive, and when we do that, but it's also a great platform for skilling. A lot of our girls want other training, and we are exploring options. So it's like, Josh, I really like you, but after 2 years, I'm out, right? I'm going to do something else. So we want to help them, civil service exams, or or whatever is their desire, and so we try to support them in those things, but we're really focusing on technology, skilling. It can be done. It can be done in our own campuses. If it's close to a dorm, it's a lot easier, to train them. And but I think the government needs to look at this entire framework, because it is 20 million people you're going to be skilling in the next 10 years, and that's a big commitment. So
it's interesting that he talked about the responsibility of skilling being with industry, but I'm sure if people just walked out of colleges and said, I'm ready to be employed by Foxconn and their ilk, that's something you'd welcome. So, and the context in which I asked you this question is some years ago when we talked about changing the curriculum for a particular university, the time between proposal and actual change, if it actually goes through, was anywhere between 2 and 3 years. And the industry didn't have the patience to wait because technology has changed so fast. So in that context, where do you think the government can help?
In my opinion, from an India perspective, the government has done a good job in terms of building a foundation of people who are educated with the basic skills that are there. We may have our misgivings about the quality of engineering college, etc., but there are enough of those people there. Now, when you come to a high-tech industry like electronics, where the gap comes is, if this is a particular process machine which is there, there is a set of skills that I need to operate this process machine. And that knowledge is what what the industry needs in fairly large numbers, and which the country does not have today. Now, that's where Josh rightfully said that it falls on industry, that the industry has to train those folks, just like how the software industry trained the people on the latest of the software development tools that came up. Now, we have to keep in mind that when we look at electronic manufacturing industry, we have industries that go across the small and medium and the large companies. Now, for large corporations, when they are setting up a plant, they can say that I will set up a mini scale plant where I will train my folks. They can build that into their budgets. But if you take the small and medium industries, for them it becomes a challenge as to how are they going to get their trained people. And particularly when, as a sector, the capacity is increasing and there is demand for people continuously coming. Now, that is a cost to industry. I mean, anybody can do it, but then that's a cost that you have to invest. So the government can help, like the way the Chinese government helped and the Vietnamese government helped, in setting up these training centers. So they have to invest in these capital machinery that is used in manufacturing and give exposure to boys, diploma holders and engineers to come and work on them, so that when they go to industry, the whole period of getting on and getting running is reduced. Because your whole profitability in electronics is very closely linked to yield, and yield is how well you maintain the machines, how well you sort of run the processes, adjust the processes, and even a 0.1% drop in yield can mean that you're not profitable for that particular month. So yes, the government has done a good job. We got a good base of people, possibly on the language side, because everybody from cities may or may not land up in manufacturing side. So if we are going to the semi-urban India, maybe some amount of language skills and things to be bridged, but otherwise, yes. So this is what the situation on ground is in terms of skilled people there, and the need is there. So anybody who is coming and setting up a plant will expect that I have people available. Today, what's happening is with large companies coming into India, the Indian small and medium industries are losing their work. So, in my plant, there is somebody working, I'm paying him X rupees, and there he comes and he says X plus delta, and tomorrow I have nobody in my good shop. So that challenge is there for the small and medium industry.
Okay. So I think we're getting on for time, but I just wanted to spend a few minutes on one particular issue. This is about being environmentally responsible for the environment, because just from personal experience, I have about over the last 15 years, I've collected about 5 or 6 mobile phones and 1 printer, and I don't want to give it to the Raddiwala because I don't know what he'll do with it. So, and you had earlier talked about the extended producer responsibility.
Yes.
Is that working for India, where we are responsible for making sure that some or all parts of what goes out of the factory is something that they can? So
India's e-waste rules has adopted has adopted what we call as the EPR, what we call as Extended Producer Responsibility, which is a global framework that the Indian industry has adopted. The e-waste rules came out in 2012. The revised rules came out in 2016. You had a period of about 4 years where the industry got time to sort of get aligned and put in place the infrastructure to do that. So what's the good thing? The good thing is that major electronic industry have all signed up for EPR. And the regime is such that you need to have an EPR license if you need to do business in India. That means if you want to import your raw material, if you want to sell your products, if you want to manufacture, you need to have an EPR license. And essentially what this EPR license talks of is that the company gives an undertaking saying that if I have manufactured and sold so much of products into the market, I will ensure that they are safely recycled. And there is a target that the industry has given. It began a few years back, 10% in the first year, 20% in the second year, 30%. So in that sense, it is, I am very happy that the industry has adopted this. There are, of course, challenges that are coming up because, of course, in the press you read otherwise. The other day you had a story of, saying that there was a vendor who had a collection point and the collection point didn't exist. And so India has always had the most efficient recycling economy.
I'd say that.
Nothing in India goes waste. We have a very good kabadiwala or raddiwala system. In fact, anything and everything that is usable is collected and reused. So that is today a challenge for the electronics industry because they cannot get e-waste. This system of informal system of collection that employs lakhs of people collects the waste so well, whereas if I am industry and I am say whoever it is, I don't want to take a name, and I got a target of 1,000 tons that I have to process, I am not getting 1,000 tons of raw material. And today I have to go to this informal ecosystem and say, I want to buy 100 tons from you. He is smart because he also wants 1,000 tons. And so I have to bid
the highest bidder.
So those are some of the challenges that are there. There are other things to the informal sector that they do recycling in a manner which is not so safe. There is arsenic and poisonous gases that keep coming out, etc., which is there. So there is a recycling industry that has come up. There is something called as a PRO framework that has come up. So we are on our journey, as an industry. And to keep the industry on its toes, we have both NGTs and the NGOs who do that.
Before we move to questions, you want to comment on that from your
I think it's no compromise. I think absolutely no compromise. I think global companies clearly, we follow global standards and we signed up for EPR. But I'll say, just to add, so this is, my dad has been a factory man and he's sitting back there, from Madras Fertilizers. And Madras Fertilizers was built 50 years ago based on reuse from the refineries, Madras oil refineries. Naphtha, which is a byproduct, created urea, right? Am I saying it correct, Dad? And so the key is to find, those solutions, if there are, to not your dabawala, but in a professional manner where it's all recycled, and yes, this whole refurbishing, of certain products is actually a good economics, and I think refurbishing what is in India in a professional manner, I think it's a great business opportunity as well, and whatever is really scrap, I think we need to very carefully handle it. But India does have a long way to go in providing the infrastructure for that, something which we need to work on.
Okay. We're ready to move into questions from the audience.
You were mentioning about red carpet. Tamil Nadu lost out when the red carpet was not laid by Tamil Nadu to Bill Gates. Hyderabad and Bangalore did. And that's where the political interference can destroy a state's future. And we could have had 5,000 jobs. And we could have had a center set up here. Somebody who was stupid, who did not. So that was regarding your red carpet, how a red carpet was not laid for Bill Gates when he came to India, and how we lost out on that.
I didn't know that.
It's a fact which many people know here. Regarding export-led and skilling, skilling is something which we have to give a lot more importance to than what is being done today, because I'll give you the example which I know. I set my targets for my children. So I told my son that you should study in an Ivy League institution. I sent him to Cornell, and he was picked up by Intel. So while most of the people here, when you open the laptop, you can see inside, Intel inside is what all of you see. Thanks to my son, I was inside Intel more than once. And I know how Intel goes about manufacturing things and all that. So that's the benefit which I had in giving skilling to my children and telling them that the best school is, go to the best school if you can make it. And he made it, and he went to Intel, and mainly because he was in Cornell. Now, export-led is possible provided the thinking changes at the lower level in our country. In Japan, I was in Japan, and my friends told me about, I was looking at the camera and I was saying, hey, you've got a much better camera than what we had. I was thinking of Minolta and Yashica, and he was having a much better camera. Then he said, this is something which we all have to learn. He said that the best is manufactured for people to consume in Japan. Their export qualities are depending upon the requirements and the quality. When they export to India, they export cheaper qualities. When to Europe, slightly better. To United States, different. So our export quality, which if we want to lead export, then we should first change and try to make things of a much better standard than what we are having today in many industries. iPhones stand out as an example where we are probably good. But in many other things, we make substandard things. For instance, I'll give you one example and stop. In pharmaceutical
Great points, sir. Great points, sir. Just in the interest of time, we have to move on. There are a lot of people waiting. But thank you.
Yeah, question down here. I actually found this quite a stimulating conversation because there's a lot of positivity. The question is, we're seeing a lot of patent grabbing from China all of a sudden through research. Especially this year, they've boosted the number of patents they find. Do you see that as a risk for electronics manufacturing in India, especially in some of the stuff in the automotive, self-driving? You said two-wheelers, great opportunity, maybe drones and some of the other opportunities there?
I'm not aware of patent grabbing by China, Sam. But I think it's this whole IPR handling in India can be improved, and IPR protection is very good in India. So a lot of the multinational companies do come to India with that assurance that their IPR will be protected. And I think we need to do more of that. But I don't know, George, I don't know whether you can answer his question more.
In electronics, what happens is no IPR is standalone. So I do not know about this aspect of grabbing, because I don't think China can grab in that fashion, because the original owner of the IPR would take China to court. So, but even if they did that, or they came out with a lot of new patents, say in automobile field, that patent will be resident in some product, which eventually will be integrated with a overall system that is there. And so the way how the system works is that today, for example, if you have this phone here, and say you got a USB port, the USB port is a standard, the patent is held by a consortium of people. So when I pay 10,000 rupees for this phone, there is 5 rupees which is going to the patent holder of the USB port. So that's how the value chain flows. We don't see it. I mean, you buy it from, say, Samsung, Samsung pays it to their manufacturer, the manufacturer pays it to the chip vendor pays it to the patent holder. So, so the point I was trying to say is that it need not be a concern for us because it will get built into the value chain that is there. But I may use this opportunity to say that, look, in automobile sector with electric vehicles coming in, it's in the cutting edge. There is a lot of new development that is happening. It's an opportunity for India to participate in creating standards and products there. So something that in our country we are aware of, but I think we have not capitalized or we have not been able to put it to work is standards are a precursor to innovation. So when we talk of R&D, I'm not talking of fundamental R&D, I'm talking of applied R&D. And that applied R&D is what gets commercialized. So what we as a country should see is that India should be on the standards bodies defining the standards for the automobile electronics and the electric vehicles that are going to come. You got both the power electronics that drives, and then you got the microcontroller and the controllers that are over there. We should be defining those standards, and these standards we should publish to all the youngsters who are there in the country. These youngsters then will come up with products which then larger corporations will absorb and then take it to the market. But then that essentially becomes Indian IP, and you take a leadership position in the world. So this is that's an opportunity that is there for the country. This is something from MATE's side that we are propagating to the government, because we have got bodies like Bureau of Indian Standards and TCE that they are regulators. They implement standards. To define standards, you need academicians. You need people who are technical, deep technical, So my proposition to the government is you are giving hundreds of crores to IITs and various institutions, of higher learning. Why don't you also give them a responsibility? Say IIT Chennai. Out of the money I give you, I want you to be the standards leader in power electronics for electric vehicles. That should be the quid pro quo, and there a team of people are up to date with what's happening worldwide and keeps India on the forefront. And that's what we should do in automobile, in biomedical, etc. which is there.
Small comment on what you mentioned on electric vehicles.
Yes,
You were talking now about what to do with the standards.
yes.
I was in China a few weeks back. The entire two-wheeler industry is running on batteries. Entire. Buses in most cities are running on electric vehicles. And China now accounts for more than half the electric cars produced in the world. Our pundits like you are still talking about creating standards for this. Where are we? How are you going to catch up at all? We will be left far behind as you have done in other industrial revolutions. So one question differently. On the subject of this, I want to raise a question. May I please?
Please.
I'm a journalist. I've been visiting factories for my bread, for my livelihood. So one of the factories I visited a couple of years ago was Dell Computers. It was producing 3,000 PCs per day. And I was quite impressed. The MD took me around and all. At the end of it, I asked him, how much of it is produced, how much part of it is produced in India? He said, he mumbled and said 3. What are the 3? One is the dabba, the carton. The second is the sponge. The third is a manual. We didn't have anything else produced in that factory. They are employing a large number of people from outside. And then I related it to what we have been doing for computers. Tamil Nadu government spends 1,000 to 2,000 crore on free laptops. UP does it, Maharashtra does it. Most states do it. But all the PCs here are imported. These laptops are imported. As you said some time back, unfortunately, there is no coordinated approach to this either by the states or by the center. We are all working in isolation. How are you going to tackle this?
To your first question, to believe that any nation economy can work in isolation, you can't. You are today too integrated. So yes, China has had a lead, right, because they went ahead and did it. What India would do is pick up the standards that are there in China and build on that. Because what we believe is, yes, there is going to be more development that is going to come. I mean, today lithium ion is a battery, tomorrow you're going to have a new battery source, right? So, but we have to be there if we have to take advantage of this emerging technology that is there. Otherwise, our industry and our, the innovation-led design part of it would not happen. Right? Nothing to take credit away from China that they have taken up the leadership in this particular area which is over there. And your second question was in terms of the production. Like I said, manufacturing goes to the place of the least cost. It's like water flows to the lowest level. So yes, the cabinets are made cheaper in China, the metal cabinets. The semiconductors are made cheaper in Taiwan. The hard disks are made cheaper in Malaysia, right? So that's where manufacturing will go. And what we will then have over here, and which is why it is imperative for India to build a competitive local manufacturing ecosystem so that Seagate shifts its hard disk from Malaysia to India, TSC shifts a semiconductor plant from Taiwan to India, InWin shifts the cabinet from Taiwan to India. That's what we have to make happen.
He asked a question, what is the inverted duty structure in the component manufacturing sector, which you are worried about and which the government has not attended to? I'm asking this question because I was a revenue secretary when the STPAs and all came into this country, and Vittal was the Secretary of Electronics. And at that time, when any such question arose, it was immediately attended to and solved.
Yeah.
So what is the problem you are facing now?
So in the GST regime, we do not have a problem of inverted duty structure. Essentially, what happens is, like I said, in electronics, we have got the ITA 1 products and we got the non-ITA 1 products. The ITA 1 products, like computers, are pegged at 0% BCD. Their input components also come at 0% BCD. But when you take the non-ITA products, say, take a mobile phone, which is over there, then what happens is the phone is today pegged at a 20% duty, which fueled or supported this whole domestic manufacturing which is there. But the component which comes in for that will come in at a 0% duty. So, for the phone, yeah. But that exactly is not a 0% duty. Yeah, so we do not have a 0%, we do not have an inverted duty structure today in electronics. It used to be there in the past.
No, within the same kind or category,
Yeah.
you said there weren't. But if a component went into an ITA 1 product
Right.
and also into an ITA, non-ITA 1 product, then
Both it would be 0. Both it
so there is no inverted
yeah, there is
structure.
no,
Okay,
it's only that components are at
it's just gone now. That's gone.
So I can actually attest.
Yeah, sure.
When this happened, he was revenue secretary.
Right.
I was the president of
Mate.
chairman of MATE.
Okay.
I still remember going to him and instantly he sorted out.
Solved it out.
He didn't even wait for the budget. He
Yeah.
intervened and sorted it out.
That is when the WTO came in.
After the ITA thing came and all.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
Yeah,
I
that was
remember
when,
this in his office then.
yeah, the whole of government reacted very, very quickly, I must compliment. In fact, MATE was in DOT, it was called Department of Electronics that time. 3 days and 3 nights, they went component by component because computers became 0, but the components were at higher duty. And I think on the 4th day, you all came out with the notification, bringing all of that to 0.
Well, I am Ramesh. How authentic are the various numbers that are being thrown around, like 1 trillion and 1.5 million PCs and laptops being manufactured and all those things, including the numbers thrown up by MATE?
Yeah.
How authentic are they? Because we have been hearing different numbers going in different directions. So, please bear with me to answer this.
Yeah.
So the 400 billion and the 1 trillion are estimates. So 400 billion is an estimate.
No, I have also, during the early 2000s, I have heard the MATE chief saying that about 1.1 million PCs are being manufactured, including laptops and stuff like that. And now, about half an hour back, you said we close to about 1.5 lakhs or so is being manufactured from this part of the world, kind of thing. So, are the numbers not going hovering just like that?
Okay.
And how do I, as a layperson, follow it?
So you had asked me 2 questions. How accurate are these estimates? So there are these bodies that carry out global surveys and they publish the results. So what they do is they collect the information from individual companies and put it together and do certain amount of mathematical algorithm and come out with what is the production level. So IDC is one of them, Gartner is another one. So those are the figures that are taken. And from an overall industry perspective, you need to appreciate that nobody is looking for very exact figures. We need broad figures, and that is sufficient to take business decisions. So that's on that aspect of it. Coming to the second part of it, where I mentioned that it's only 10 to 12% utilized today. Yes, the fact is that in 2006 to 2010-11, that's when PC manufacturing was at its peak, where IBM, HP, all of them came into India. We had the preferential market access framework, and all the plants were running at full capacity, whatever it is. Subsequently, like I said, the whole PMA framework didn't work out It's very difficult to implement in a technology field that changes very rapidly. So, the government also, or the buyer also has to keep changing, and so it doesn't work out. So today, all these plants, what they do is, because it is cheaper to make abroad, they, import it. So the capacity is there, it is lying idle, and these are all fairly accurate figures. They are all fairly accurate figures. Nobody likes to admit that they are running at 12-15% capacity, but that is reality. But that is also an opportunity for India, because you got that 6 million PCs dormant lying over there. So you can make an export-led manufacturing, enable it. These plants can quickly come to capacity and we can start exporting.
So India was having, means the worldwide electronic wave was there in 1990 and somehow we missed it. And now there is this second wave of electric vehicles and tomorrow will be there some more waves coming. How do you see that the startup culture that is in India today, the entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs, and now even we have the second generation entrepreneurs also, how they are going to change it? Do you believe that this will be a critical factor which will ensure that we don't miss any more waves that is coming out?
So, which of you wants
So
to
can I?
Josh?
So I think good question. In fact, it's a great question. And see, what is happening in the startup culture, and which is very encouraging now, is the startups are now moving away from the logistics, commerce, startups to really hardware startups. And so I'm quite excited. We are starting to support these startups from a hardware platform. We are getting involved with the IIT Incubation Center right behind here. And it's exciting to see the number of youngsters like yourself who are excited about hardware. And I think what is going to be, and I think the next 36 months is going to be very critical in this space, because I talked about this cloud and AI and IoT. What I did not talk about was 5G. 5G is just going to propel, the latency in 5G is going to be very less, which is going to really enable real-time applications. The bandwidth, the speed, which is going to be 100x of 4G, all these, and many other use cases, right, which will support so many use cases. So there is so many things which the Indian hardware startup ecosystem can do in a nice manner to support India, because India's applications are unique to India. Yes, there are a lot of patents which you can apply from elsewhere, and which we do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then there are so many things which are unique to India, which you guys have to go figure out, right? The only advice to Indian startups is that don't look for your exit all the time, right? So yes. I hope so. Yeah.
So,
I think, I don't know why it has to be cutting edge. It doesn't matter, right? It's where is the business? I think you should focus. I think in the next 5 years, I would say for an export proposition, all this IoT connected devices would be a good one, because I think there's going to be global demand just coming through everybody's ears. And I think we need to really look at what those opportunities are and then invest in it. So,
just one more question. I know you have a question. We'll take it offline. Apologize.
So if you look back at the success of the software industry, one of the main factors is that we've had some great companies out of India, Cognizant, Infosys, and we know the rest of the story. Are there such Indian companies in the electronic space which are going to be trailblazers? Or have you missed the bus on that? Yes, there is Foxconn, but it's not an Indian company. And forgive me if I'm sounding like a patriot, but are there any companies, and if they are, who are these?
I think I'm going to let George take this question.
All the tough questions to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
All right, Cognizant and Infosys did not happen overnight. right? They worked for a number of years. I mean, I know, I've seen Infosys when they started out as a small team doing data entry for MICO, generating the money that was needed to put their software team together to what they are today, So it's a journey that we have to walk. In electronics, will we see something like that happening? Yes, we will have to give a similar kind of time available. It will happen. But currently the need is for us to bring these global players into India. And in today's global economy, there isn't anything much like an Indian company or a foreign company because there is so much of equity stakeholding across which is there, and this is not strategic electronics or military electronics which is there. So that is an area we truly should not worry too much about, whether it's Indian owned or multinational owned which is there. If it comes here, we will get the benefit. And to this gentleman's question regarding what is an area which would be exciting for India to work on, I would say sensor IoTs. So India has got a lot of technology on sensors. Our DRDOs and CSIR labs have built sensors for detecting gases, temperature, vibration, etc., etc. Now, converting these from those sensors, chemical or electromechanical, to an IoT device is a fairly measurable amount of work that can be done. And if we do this successfully, we can patent it and we can sell it to the globe. It's a very low-hanging fruit for India, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Josh.
Without taking too much time, let me thank Mr. Folger, Mr. Paul for a very insightful conversation. Another round of applause, please. Thank you, Bharat. It was a pleasure working with you. And thank you, Robin, wherever you are. Thank you. And thank you all for being here with us today. Our next program is on 27th. Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal is here. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.